The elevator cable snapped at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and in the 13 seconds it took for the emergency brakes to scream into position, Ryan Carter's entire understanding of right and wrong shattered alongside the fluorescent panel above his head. Trapped in darkness with a woman whose net worth could buy his daughter's future 1,000 times over, he heard 5 words that would destroy everything he'd worked for. "They're stealing from everyone, Ryan." Elena Valle's voice cracked, not with fear of the fall, but with the weight of a truth she'd been carrying alone. The richest woman in the building wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid no one would stop them. Before we dive into Ryan's story, a single father, a failing audit, and a conspiracy that would cost him everything he couldn't afford to lose, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let's begin. Ryan Carter's daughter turned 7 on a Wednesday, and he celebrated by maxing out his last credit card on a grocery store cake with pink frosting that tasted like chemicals and hope. He sang to her in their apartment, the one with water stains spreading across the ceiling like a slow-motion map of his failures, and watched her blow out candles that cost 49 cents for a pack of 12. She made a wish. He didn't ask what it was. He was terrified she'd wished for something he couldn't give her. "Daddy, why are you crying?" Mia asked, frosting on her upper lip. "I'm not crying, baby. I've got allergies." "You always say that." She wasn't wrong. Ryan had been allergic to his own life for about 3 years now, ever since his ex-wife walked out with a yoga instructor named Brandon and left him with full custody, empty savings, and a reputation in their small town as the guy who couldn't keep his family together. People stopped hiring him for freelance accounting work. Said he seemed distracted. Said they needed someone more stable. As if watching your marriage collapse in real time while trying to balance someone else's books was a character flaw instead of just being human. The contract offer from Vail Industries came through his email at 11:34 p.m. on a Sunday, which should have been his first warning sign. Nobody sends legitimate job offers that late unless they're desperate or shady. The subject line read, "Financial audit position, immediate start, competitive compensation." Ryan read it twice, checked the sender domain, Googled the company, then read it again. Vail Industries, one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast. The CEO was Elena Vail, some kind of corporate prodigy who'd inherited her father's business at 25 and somehow turned it into an empire by 30. The kind of woman who showed up in Forbes with perfect hair and shark eyes, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows like she owned the skyline itself. The salary they offered was more than Ryan had made in the last 18 months combined. He accepted before he could talk himself out of it. His first day at Vail Industries, Ryan wore a suit he'd bought at a consignment shop that smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's ambition. The building was all glass and steel, the kind of place where even the air felt expensive. Security made him wait in the lobby for 20 minutes while they verified his credentials, processed his temporary badge, and scanned him with handheld metal detectors like he might be smuggling weapons instead of anxiety and a desperate need to not screw this up. The HR director who gave him his orientation was a woman named Paula with a smile that never reached her eyes and a handshake that felt like touching a mannequin. She walked him through compliance policies, non-disclosure agreements, and about 47 different ways he could get fired for breathing wrong. She kept calling the company a family, which Ryan found darkly hilarious given that his actual family had fallen apart, and this place was the only thing keeping him and Mia from falling through the cracks entirely. "You'll be working primarily with department financial records," Paula said, clicking through a slideshow that could have been designed to induce sleep. "Your access will be limited to level 3 clearance initially. If your work is satisfactory, that may expand." "What am I auditing specifically?" Paula's smile tightened. "Mr. Carter, you'll receive your assignments through the portal. Everything you need to know will be provided on a need-to-know basis." "Right, need to know. Got it." She didn't like his tone. He could tell by the way her fingers paused on the keyboard, hovering like she was deciding whether to make a note in his file. She didn't. Instead, she stood, smoothed her skirt, and told him his workspace was on the 14th floor, East Wing, Desk 42. Desk 42 turns out to be a cube in a row of identical cubes, all occupied by people who looked like they'd been slowly drained of joy through some kind of corporate osmosis. Nobody spoke. Everyone typed. The fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency that made Ryan's molars ache. He logged into the system using the credentials Paula had given him and started pulling files. The first thing he noticed was how clean everything was. Not clean like organized, clean like scrubbed. Financial records from the last 3 years showed perfect compliance, perfect returns, perfect allocations. Every number lined up, every account balanced. Every transaction had 3 layers of documentation. Ryan had been auditing books since he was 22, and he'd never seen anything this perfect. Perfect was a red flag. He spent his first week digging into employee pension fund allocations. The numbers were pristine. Contributions matched payroll deductions down to the cent. Investment returns were steady, predictable, almost boring. There were no discrepancies, no anomalies, no human error, which was impossible. Human beings made mistakes. Accounting systems had glitches. Markets fluctuated. There should have been something, some decimal point out of place, some late payment, some correction logged in the notes. But there was nothing. Just perfect, frictionless numbers that looked like they'd been generated by a machine that didn't understand how real money actually moved. By Friday of his second week, Ryan had a headache that wouldn't quit, and a suspicion that wouldn't either. He started making notes in a personal notebook. Old school, pen and paper, nothing digital that could be tracked. He wrote down account numbers, timestamps, transaction patterns. He drew circles around things that didn't make sense. He underlined the word "too clean" 3 times. That's when he met her. It was 5:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, late enough that most people had already left, early enough that Ryan still had 3 hours of work ahead of him if he wanted to meet his deadline. He was standing at the 14th floor elevator bank, holding a stack of files he probably wasn't supposed to remove from his desk, when the doors opened and Elena Vale stepped out. He recognized her immediately. You didn't work at Vale Industries without knowing what the CEO looked like. But seeing her in person was different than seeing her in Forbes. She was shorter than he expected, maybe 5'6" in heels that probably cost more than his rent. She wore a charcoal suit that fit like it had been designed specifically for her body, and her hair was pulled back in a way that made her look both younger and harder than her 30 years. She walked past him without a glance, trailing 2 assistants who were both talking at her simultaneously. Something about a board meeting and a merger and a call with Singapore that couldn't wait. Elena didn't respond to either of them. She just kept walking, her heels clicking on the polished floor like a countdown. Ryan stepped into the elevator, hit the button for the lobby. Tried not to think about how people like Elena Vale lived in a completely different universe than people like him, and those universes never actually touched except in moments like this. Brief, anonymous, meaningless. The elevator descended 2 floors, then the lights flickered. Then everything stopped. The elevator lurched once, hard enough to make Ryan stumble into the wall. The files he was holding scattered across the floor. The overhead lights went out, replaced by a dim emergency backup that cast everything in sickly yellow. And then nothing. No movement. No sound except for his own breathing and the faint mechanical hum of the building around them. Ryan waited for the doors to open. They didn't. He pressed the emergency call button. A crackling voice came through the speaker. We're aware of the situation. Maintenance is on the way. Please remain calm. How long? They're assessing the issue now, sir. The connection cut off. Ryan looked down at the files scattered around his feet and tried to calculate exactly how screwed he was for removing confidential documents from his workspace. Then he heard something that made him forget about the files entirely. A voice. Quiet. Shaking. Are we falling? Ryan turned. Elena Vale was standing in the corner of the elevator, both hands pressed flat against the wall, her face drained of color. For a second, he didn't process what he was seeing. This was the woman who'd been on the cover of Fortune magazine with the headline, "The Ice Queen of Private Equity." The woman who'd reportedly fired 3 executives in one meeting without raising her voice. The woman who negotiated billion-dollar deals before breakfast. And she looked absolutely terrified. We're not falling, Ryan said, keeping his voice steady. The emergency brakes caught us. We're safe. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm sure. She didn't move. Didn't take her hands off the wall. Her breathing was too fast, too shallow. Ryan had seen panic attacks before. His ex-wife used to have them during arguments, back when they still fought instead of just existing in separate rooms. Hey, he said, taking a step closer but not too close. Look at me. Elena's eyes snapped to his face. They were gray, sharp, but also swimming with something that looked a lot like fear trying to drown itself. "We're okay," Ryan said. "The elevator's stuck, but we're not in danger. They'll get us out. Might take a little while, but they'll get us out." "How do you know?" "Because this is a brand new building with state-of-the-art safety systems, and if we died in here, the lawsuits would cost Vale Industries more than it's worth." She let out a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something breaking. "You work here?" "Yeah." "What department?" "I'm a contractor. Financial audit." Something changed in her face. The fear didn't disappear, but it got shoved behind something else, something calculating. She looked at him the way people look at slot machines when they're deciding whether to pull the lever. "What's your name?" "Ryan Carter." "Ryan Carter." She repeated it like she was testing how it felt. Then she slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor of the elevator, her expensive suit crumpling around her like it didn't matter. "I'm Elena." "I know." "Right. Of course you do." She closed her eyes, took a breath, opened them again. "Ryan Carter, who audits financial records. Do you know what you're looking at?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm sorry?" "The files, the pension funds, the investment allocations. Do you know what you're looking at?" Ryan felt something cold settle in his stomach. "I'm looking at documentation." "No." Elena's voice was quiet but sharp, like a scalpel. "You're looking at a lie. A very expensive, very carefully constructed lie that's been running for at least 3 years, maybe longer." Ryan didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest, a gesture so at odds with her CEO persona that it made her look like a different person entirely. "Someone inside my company is stealing from the pension funds. They've built a ghost system underneath the real one. Fake investments, shell corporations, redirected payments, and they've made it look so clean, so perfect, that nobody's noticed. Nobody except me. If you know about it, why haven't you stopped it?" "Because I don't know who." She looked up at him, and for the first time Ryan saw something other than fear or calculation in her eyes. He saw exhaustion. "I've been trying to trace it for 6 months. Every time I get close, the trail disappears. Every person I trust turns out to be involved, or they get reassigned, or they quit. I'm surrounded by people who are either corrupt or incompetent, and I can't tell which is which." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're an outsider. You don't owe anyone here loyalty. You don't have history with the executives or stakes in the company beyond your contract." She paused. "And because you're stuck in an elevator with me, and I'm tired of carrying this alone." Ryan sat down on the floor across from her, his back against the opposite wall. The files he'd been carrying were scattered between them, like evidence at a crime scene. "You could have hired external investigators, forensic accountants, the FBI. I could have. And whoever's doing this would bury the evidence before anyone got close. They have access to everything. They know the systems. They've had years to prepare for this." Elena's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs to stop it. "I need someone who's already inside, someone they don't see coming. That's not my job." "No. Your job is to audit financial records and look for discrepancies. I'm telling you there are discrepancies. Big ones. The kind that destroy lives." "Why should I believe you?" It was a fair question, and they both knew it. Elena could be lying, could be testing him, could be running some elaborate corporate game that Ryan didn't understand. But when she looked at him, there was something in her expression that cut through all the possibilities and landed on something uncomfortably real. "Because if I'm lying," she said quietly, "then I just confessed to corporate fraud to a stranger in a broken elevator, which would make me the stupidest CEO in the history of American business. And I'm a lot of things, Ryan Carter, but I'm not stupid." The elevator gave a small lurch. Both of them tensed. But nothing happened. Just the building settling around them, groaning like something old and tired. "How much are they stealing?" Ryan asked. "I don't know exactly, but based on what I've been able to piece together, somewhere between 20 and 40 million over 3 years. Ryan felt the number like a punch. That's enough to destroy the retirement security of every non-executive employee in this company. "Yeah." Elena's voice went flat. "People who've worked here for decades. People who trusted their pensions to be safe. People who have families and mortgages and futures that depend on that money actually being there when they retire. People like him. People like Mia. Ryan thought about his daughter's birthday cake, the pink frosting, the cheap candles, the wish she wouldn't tell him because she knew better than to wish for things he couldn't afford. If I look into this, he said slowly, and I find what you're talking about, what happens? We expose it. We stop it. We get the money back. And if the people stealing it are powerful enough to hide it for 3 years, what happens to me when they realize I'm the one uncovering their system? Elena didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was honest in a way that made Ryan respect her and want to run from her at the same time. I don't know, but I can tell you what happens if nobody stops them. They keep stealing. They get better at it. And when the pension fund finally collapses, everyone blames market conditions or mismanagement, and the people responsible walk away rich while everyone else loses everything. The elevator lurched again. This time, the emergency speaker crackled to life. We have crews working on the issue. You should be moving within the next 10 to 15 minutes. Are you both all right in there? Ryan reached up and hit the button. We're fine. Elena was watching him. Not the way a CEO watches a contractor. The way one person watches another when they're trying to figure out if they're about to make a terrible mistake together. If I do this, Ryan said, I need protection. I need access to files I don't currently have clearance for. And I need you to understand that if this blows up, I can't afford to lose this job. I have a daughter, I have bills, I have about $600 in my bank account, and a landlord who doesn't accept good intentions as rent. I'll protect you. You can't promise that. No, Elena admitted, but I can try. And right now trying is all I've got. The elevator hummed, then jerked, then started moving again slowly, like something wounded, but moving. The emergency light stayed dim, but the floor numbers started ticking down on the display. 12, 11, 10. Ryan gathered his files from the floor. Elena stood, brushing off her suit, even though there was nothing to brush off. By the time the elevator reached the lobby and the doors opened, she looked like herself again, composed, untouchable, every inch the ice queen of private equity. But Ryan had seen her sitting on the floor with her knees pulled to her chest, and you couldn't unsee something like that. She stepped out first, turned back to look at him. Check your email tonight. I'll send you expanded access credentials. Start with the Shell Corporation transactions from 18 months ago. Look for anything routed through accounts ending in 7734. How do you know about those accounts? Because I've been looking at this for 6 months, Ryan. I know where some of the bodies are buried. I just can't dig them up alone. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the lobby crowd like she'd never been trapped in an elevator at all. Like she'd never told a stranger that her entire company was built on top of a lie. Ryan stood there for a long moment, holding his files and trying to figure out if he'd just made the smartest decision of his life or the dumbest. His phone buzzed, a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched Mia after school. She's fine. $8 snacks, wants to know if you're bringing pizza. Ryan typed back, yeah, pizza. I'll be there in 30. He took the subway home because his car had died 3 months ago and he couldn't afford to fix it. He picked up a $10 pizza that was mostly grease and cardboard. He climbed the stairs to his apartment and found Mia sitting at their kitchen table doing homework in a workbook that was 2 grades below where she should be because the school kept passing her along even though she was struggling. Daddy! She jumped up and wrapped her arms around his waist. You're late. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Work stuff. Was it important? Ryan looked down at his daughter, 7 years old, missing a front tooth, wearing a shirt with a stain on the collar that he kept forgetting to treat. She looked up at him with complete trust, like he was someone who had his life together, someone who made good decisions. Yeah, he said quietly. It was important. That night, after Mia went to bed, Ryan opened his laptop and checked his email. There was a message from an internal Vail Industries address he didn't recognize. No subject line, just a single attachment, a temporary security clearance upgrade, and a list of account numbers. The last line of the email read, "Be careful. They're watching everything." Ryan stared at the screen for a long time. He thought about his daughter sleeping in the next room. He thought about the pension funds being drained. He thought about Elena Vail sitting on an elevator floor, carrying a truth too big for one person to hold. Then he opened the first file and started reading. The numbers looked perfect, clean, flawless. But Ryan had learned a long time ago that perfect was just another word for hiding something. He worked until 3 in the morning, mapping transactions and tracing accounts. He didn't find anything concrete. Not yet. But he found patterns, repetitions, timing that was just slightly too convenient to be coincidence. He found the edges of the lie. And he knew, the way you know something in your bones before your brain catches up, that pulling on this thread was going to unravel everything. The company, the conspiracy, maybe his entire life. But people were being robbed. Families were being destroyed. And someone had to stop it. Ryan saved his notes to a flash drive he kept hidden in a coffee can in his kitchen cabinet. He shut down his laptop. He sat in the dark of his tiny apartment and tried to convince himself that he wasn't about to ruin everything he'd worked for. He failed. But he was going to do it anyway, because that's what you did when you were broke and desperate, and the only thing you had left was the ability to choose between looking away and looking closer. Ryan chose closer. And somewhere in a tower of glass and steel, Elena Vale was making the same choice, betting everything on a man she'd met for 13 minutes in a broken elevator. Neither of them knew how much it was going to cost, but they were about to find out. Ryan started seeing the pattern on his 4th night of digging through the files Elena had given him access to. It was 2:43 a.m., and his eyes felt like someone had rubbed sandpaper across them. But there it was, a transaction loop that repeated every 17 days like clockwork. Money moved from the pension fund into what looked like a legitimate investment vehicle, sat there for exactly 48 hours, then got rerouted through 3 shell corporations before landing in an account that didn't appear anywhere in Vale Industries' official records. The amount varied, sometimes 30,000, sometimes 60, but it always moved on the same schedule, and it always disappeared into the same black hole. Ryan took a screenshot, saved it to his flash drive, and felt his stomach turn over. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping or a clerical error someone could explain away. This was deliberate, systematic. Someone had built this structure with the kind of precision that only came from planning and practice. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop looking at your screen and get some sleep. You're no good to anyone exhausted." Ryan's heart kicked into his throat. He looked around his apartment like someone might be standing there watching him, even though he knew he was alone. Mia was asleep in her room. The door was locked. The windows were closed. But someone knew what he was doing. Someone was watching. He typed back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Elena, I had your number pulled from HR. Don't panic. I'm monitoring network activity. When someone accesses the files I flagged, I get an alert. You've been logged in for 6 hours straight." Ryan exhaled. "You could have led with that instead of sounding like a stalker." "Where's the fun in that? Seriously, though, sleep. This is going to get worse before it gets better, and you need to be sharp." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her he was fine, that he could handle it, that he'd pulled all-nighters before. But the truth was, his hands were shaking, and he'd read the same column of numbers 4 times without processing any of them. "Okay," he typed. "Tomorrow night, same time." "Ryan." "What?" "Be careful who you talk to at the office. Don't tell anyone what you're looking at. Not your cube neighbors, not your friends, nobody. The people doing this are inside the building. They're watching for anyone who gets too curious." Ryan looked at the screenshot on his screen, the evidence of millions being stolen from people who couldn't afford to lose it, and felt the weight of what he'd agreed to settle onto his shoulders like something physical. "Got it," he typed. He shut down his laptop, pulled the flash drive, and hid it back in the coffee can. Then he stood in his kitchen in the dark and tried to convince himself he wasn't in over his head. He failed at that too. The next morning at Vale Industries, Ryan noticed things he hadn't noticed before. The way people moved through the office wasn't random. There were patterns. Certain executives only talked to certain people. Certain departments stayed physically separated, even when there was no reason for it. And every time Ryan pulled up a file from Elena's list, he felt eyes on him, even though nobody was looking directly at him. Paranoia, probably. Or maybe just the reality of working in a place where trust was currency, and he had none. Around 10 a.m., a man Ryan didn't recognize stopped at his cube. Mid-40s, expensive suit, smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror until it seemed almost human. "Ryan Carter?" Ryan looked up from his monitor. "Yeah?" "Martin Cross." VP of Internal Operations. He extended a hand. Ryan shook it, noting the Rolex that probably cost more than Ryan's entire annual salary. Just wanted to check in, see how you're settling into the audit work. It's fine, going well. Good, good, that's what we like to hear. Martin's smile didn't move. I noticed you've been requesting access to some older files, pension fund documentation from a couple years back. Just curious what you're working on. Sometimes the database gets confusing for new contractors. Every instinct Ryan had learned from years of reading people told him to be very careful right now. Just doing my due diligence, making sure I understand the full history before I file my compliance reports. Very thorough, I appreciate that. Martin leaned against the cube wall like they were old friends having a casual conversation. Though I should mention, some of those older files have already been audited. Might save you some time to focus on current records instead. I'll keep that in mind. Please do. We're all about efficiency here. Martin pushed off the wall, gave Ryan a friendly pat on the shoulder that felt like a warning. If you need anything, my door's always open. We take care of our people at Vale Industries. He walked away before Ryan could respond. Ryan waited until Martin was out of sight, then pulled out his phone and texted Elena. VP of Internal Operations just came by to ask why I'm looking at old pension files. Told me they've already been audited. Her response came fast. Martin Cross. He's one of them. Not the top, but definitely involved. Be very careful around him. Little late for that warning. Did you tell him anything? No, just that I was being thorough. Good. Keep being thorough. But from now on, do your deep research off-site. Use the office for surface-level work that won't raise flags. I'll get you remote access tonight. Ryan shoved his phone back in his pocket and tried to look like a man doing normal, boring audit work instead of a man who'd just been threatened by a VP in a $2,000 suit. The rest of the day crawled by. Ryan processed expense reports, checked payroll allocations, and did exactly the kind of mindless compliance work that was in his actual job description. Every time someone walked past his cube, he minimized his screen even though there was nothing suspicious on it. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart rate spiked. By 5 p.m., he was exhausted from the effort of pretending everything was normal. He picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's apartment, listened to her talk about a spelling test she'd failed, and a boy named Derek who'd stolen her pencil, and tried not to think about the fact that he was investigating a multi-million-dollar fraud that could get him fired or worse. Daddy, you're not listening, Mia said. They were sitting at their kitchen table eating reheated spaghetti that was mostly sauce and hoping. Ryan had been staring at the wall for the past 3 minutes without realizing it. I'm sorry, baby. I'm listening now. What did Derek do with your pencil? He threw it in the trash because I told him his handwriting looked like a chicken walked across his paper. Ryan tried not to smile. You probably shouldn't tell people their handwriting looks like chicken scratches. But it did. I know, but sometimes we keep those observations to ourselves. Mia stabbed at her spaghetti with more force than necessary. You always say I should tell the truth. I do say that. And you should, but there's a difference between telling the truth and being mean. I wasn't being mean, I was being accurate. Ryan looked at his daughter, 7 years old, and already developing the kind of brutal honesty that was going to make her life harder than it needed to be, and felt a surge of love mixed with worry that nearly choked him. Listen, he said, reaching across the table to take her hand. The world is going to tell you a lot of things. It's going to tell you to be nice instead of honest, to go along instead of speaking up. And most of the time, people say that because it makes their lives easier, not yours. But here's the thing, Mia. You can be honest and kind at the same time. You can tell the truth without making people feel small. How? By thinking about why you're saying something. If you're saying it to help someone, that's different than saying it to hurt them. Derek's handwriting doesn't affect you. But if you saw him struggling and you wanted to help, you could offer to show him how you practice your letters. See the difference? Mia thought about this. I guess. It's hard. I'm still learning it too. Are you telling the truth at your new job? The question caught Ryan completely off guard. What? You always look worried when you come home now, like you know something you're not supposed to know. Mom used to look like that before she left. Ryan felt something crack inside his chest. Baby, your mom leaving had nothing to do with you or anything you did. You know that, right? I know, but she looked scared, and you look scared now. Kids saw everything. Ryan had forgotten that. Or maybe he'd been hoping Mia was too young to notice that her father was slowly falling apart. I'm not scared, he lied. Then, because he'd just told her to be honest, okay, I'm a little scared, but not about you. Never about you. I'm dealing with some complicated stuff at work, but I'm handling it, I promise. Is someone stealing? Ryan's blood went cold. Why would you ask that? Because you're doing money stuff, right? Looking at numbers? And you look the way I look when I know someone cheated on a test, but I don't know if I should tell the teacher. Out of the mouths of children. Ryan took a breath and tried to figure out how to explain corporate fraud to a 7-year-old without terrifying her. Someone might be doing something wrong, he said carefully. And I'm trying to figure out if that's true, and if it is, how to stop it. But that's my job. You don't need to worry about it. Will you get in trouble? I might, but doing the right thing is worth getting in trouble for sometimes. Mia looked at him with those two old eyes that kids got when they'd seen their families break apart and learned that adults didn't always have the answers. Okay, Daddy, but be careful. I will. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ryan's laptop pinged with a new email. Remote access credentials from an IT address he didn't recognize, and a note from Elena. These will let you in from home. The connection's encrypted. Don't use your personal computer for anything else while you're logged in. No social media, no email, nothing. And don't tell anyone you have this access. Ryan logged in and found himself looking at financial records that weren't supposed to exist. These weren't the clean, perfect files he'd seen in the office. These were raw transaction logs, the kind of data that lived underneath the official reports, showing every keystroke and timestamp and routing number before someone cleaned it up for presentation. And buried in those logs were ghosts, transactions that appeared in the raw data but never made it to the final reports. Accounts that showed activity but had been scrubbed from the official ledgers. Money that moved through the system like water through a sieve, disappearing a little at a time in ways that wouldn't trigger automatic alerts. It was brilliant, actually. Whoever designed this didn't steal in big chunks that would show up on audits. They skimmed. A fraction of a percent here, a rounding error there, amounts so small that any individual transaction looked like normal market fluctuation or administrative fees, but added up over 3 years across hundreds of employee pension accounts, and you got tens of millions of dollars. Ryan started building a spreadsheet. He tracked every ghost transaction he could find, mapping them to their destination accounts, and tracing the shell corporation network. It was slow work, tedious, the kind of thing that required absolute focus and made his eyes cross after the first hour. But it was also the kind of work Ryan was good at. Numbers didn't lie. They could be manipulated, hidden, obscured, but if you knew how to read them, they told you the truth, whether they wanted to or not. By 4 a.m., he had a map. Not complete, but enough to see the shape of the operation. Enough to understand that this wasn't the work of one person. The system was too complex, touched too many departments, required too much access. This was coordinated. Multiple people working together, all of them inside Vail Industries, all of them protected by positions high enough that questioning them was career suicide. Ryan saved everything to his flash drive and was about to shut down when a new email came through. Subject line, "We need to talk." No sender name, just an internal Vail Industries email address. Ryan's finger hovered over the delete button. This could be a trap. Could be someone testing him to see if he'd respond to anonymous contact. Could be anything. He opened it anyway. The message was short. Conference room 7B, tomorrow, 7 p.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, including Elena. If you want to know who's really running this, be there. Ryan read it 3 times. This was either the break he needed or the end of everything. No way to know which until he showed up. He typed back, "How do I know this isn't a setup?" The response came immediately, like someone had been waiting for his reply. "You don't, but you're already in too deep to back out now. 7 p.m. Conference room 7B, don't be late." Ryan sat in the dark of his apartment, listening to the building settle around him and the distant sound of traffic and trying to make a decision that could ruin his life. Then he thought about Mia asking if someone was stealing, about Elena sitting on an elevator floor exhausted from carrying this alone, about the hundreds of employees whose pensions were being drained while they worked jobs they hated and trusted the company to take care of them. He typed, "I'll be there." The next day at the office felt like walking through a dream where everyone knew something he didn't. Martin Cross smiled at him in the hallway. Paula from HR asked how his work was going with a tone that suggested she already knew the answer. People Ryan had never spoken to suddenly seemed very interested in making small talk about nothing. Ryan kept his head down, did his surface work, and counted the hours until 7 p.m. At 6:45, he packed up his desk like he was leaving for the day, took the elevator down to the lobby, walked outside, then circled around to the back entrance that contractors used for late-night access and badged back in. The 14th floor was empty. Most people cleared out by 6, and the cleaning crew didn't start until 8. Ryan's footsteps echoed on the polished floor as he walked toward conference room 7B, which was tucked in a corner away from the main workspace. The lights were off inside. Ryan stood outside the door for a long moment, giving himself one last chance to turn around and pretend this email had never happened. Then he opened the door and stepped inside. The lights came on automatically. The room was empty except for a single chair facing the window and a figure sitting in it, backlit by the city lights so Ryan couldn't make out their face. "Close the door," a woman's voice said. Ryan closed the door. The figure stood and turned around, and Ryan's stomach dropped. It was Catherine Reeves, Vail Industries' chief financial officer, a woman who'd been with the company for 15 years and was widely considered Elena's most trusted executive. She was in her early 50s, sharp-featured, with gray hair she didn't bother to dye, and a reputation for being impossible to intimidate. "Mr. Carter," she said, "thank you for coming." Ryan didn't sit, didn't move, just waited. Catherine walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "I know what you're looking at. I know Elena gave you access, and I know you're trying to figure out who's stealing from the pension funds. Are you about to confess?" "No. I'm about to tell you that you're looking at the wrong people." She pulled a flash drive from her pocket and set it on the conference table between them. "Everything on here is going to contradict what Elena told you, and you're going to have to decide who you believe." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm the one who's been trying to stop this for 2 years. Long before Elena ever noticed something was wrong." Catherine's voice was tired, not defensive, just exhausted. "Elena thinks I'm part of it because the paper trail leads to my department. She's wrong, but the people who are actually doing this made very sure it would look like me." Ryan looked at the flash drive. "What's on it?" "Proof that the theft started before I became CFO. Emails from executives above my pay grade ordering specific transaction structures. Account access logs showing when and how the Go system was built. And communications between Martin Cross, 2 board members, and someone Elena trusts absolutely, coordinating the whole operation." "Who does Elena trust?" Catherine met his eyes. "Her head of security, David Marsh. He's been with her since she took over the company. She thinks he's loyal. He's not. He's the one feeding information to Cross about who's investigating what. He's the one who made sure I'd take the fall if anyone ever found the missing money." Ryan felt like the ground had shifted underneath him. "You're telling me Elena's been getting manipulated by her own head of security? I'm telling you that David Marsh is very good at his job, and his job isn't protecting Elena. It's protecting the people who are robbing her company blind." Catherine picked up the flash drive and held it out to Ryan. "Look at the evidence. Check the dates, the signatures, the metadata, then decide if I'm lying." Ryan took the drive. It felt heavier than it should. "Why give this to me? Why not go to Elena yourself?" "Because she won't believe me. She's convinced I'm the enemy. But you're an outsider. You don't have history here. If you bring her proof, she might actually look at it." Catherine moved toward the door, then stopped. "One more thing. Whatever you do, don't tell David Marsh you have this. Don't tell him what you're investigating. Don't even let him know you're suspicious. Because the moment he realizes you're a threat, you'll disappear just like the last auditor who got too close." "What happened to the last auditor?" "He quit suddenly. Took a job in another state. Left in the middle of the night without telling anyone." Catherine opened the door. "His name was Jason Torres. You should ask Elena what happened to him. Ask her if she knows where he is now. Ask her if she's even tried to find out." She left before Ryan could respond, disappearing into the empty hallway and leaving him alone in a conference room with 2 flash drives and no idea who was telling the truth. Ryan sat down in the chair Catherine had been sitting in and tried to think. Elena had seemed genuine in the elevator, scared, desperate. But Catherine had seemed genuine too. tired and frustrated and too exhausted to lie. Someone was playing him. Maybe both of them were. He pulled out his phone and typed a message to Elena. "Who's Jason Torres?" The response took 3 minutes, which was longer than usual. "Where did you hear that name?" "Answer the question." Another pause, then, "He was a financial analyst. He worked here 2 years ago. He left for another job." "Did he? What are you implying?" Ryan looked at the flash drive in his hand. "I'm implying that I just had a very interesting conversation with someone who says you're being lied to by the people closest to you. And I need to know if you've been straight with me or if I'm just another piece in someone else's game." His phone rang. Elena's name on the screen. Ryan answered. "Where are you?" Her voice was tight. "Conference room 7B. "Who told you to go there?" "I got an anonymous email." Elena swore. "Get out of there. Right now. Don't take the elevator. Use the stairs, go straight to your car, and drive home." "Why?" "Because if someone lured you there, they're watching to see who you meet with. And if they see us talking right now, they'll know we're working together. Move. Now." Ryan stood up and headed for the door. "Talk to me about Jason Torres." "Not on the phone." "Then when?" "Tomorrow. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks from your apartment. Bennett's. Meet me there at noon. Come alone." She hung up. Ryan took the stairs down 14 flights, his heart hammering the entire way. Every shadow looked like someone waiting to grab him. Every echo sounded like footsteps following. He made it to his car without incident, locked the doors, and sat there for a full minute trying to calm down before he trusted himself to drive. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Good instincts, but you should know that Elena's scared of the wrong people. Check the drive Catherine gave you. Then decide if you want to keep trusting a woman who's been lying to you from the start." Ryan stared at the message, erased it, started his car, and drove home through streets that felt darker than they should have. When he got to his apartment, Mia was already asleep and Mrs. Chen was watching a game show with the volume turned down low. "Late night," she said, not quite a question. "Work stuff." "You look terrible." "Thanks, Mrs. Chen. That's exactly what I needed to hear." She stood and gathered her knitting. "I mean, you look scared, like something's chasing you. Whatever it is, be careful. Men with families can't afford to be heroes." "I'm not trying to be a hero." "Then what are you trying to be?" Ryan didn't have an answer for that. After she left, he sat at his kitchen table and plugged Catherine's flash drive into his laptop. The files opened slowly, heavy with data. Emails, transaction logs, access records. Everything stamped with dates and metadata that would be almost impossible to fake. And it told a story that contradicted everything Elena had said. According to these files, the pension fund theft had started 4 years ago, not 3. It had been authorized by a former VP who'd since retired. And it had been actively covered up by David Marsh, Elena's head of security, who'd built the Ghost system specifically to hide the missing money from internal audits. There were emails from Marsh to Martin Cross. Communications about protecting company assets and managing exposure. Notes about the Torres situation and how they'd handled it. Ryan's hands were shaking by the time he finished reading. Either Catherine was an incredible liar who'd fabricated hundreds of documents, or Elena had been feeding him a version of the truth that conveniently left out major pieces. He closed the laptop and sat in the dark and thought about his daughter sleeping in the next room. About the promise he'd made to be careful. About the fact that he was now caught between 2 powerful people who both claimed to be victims and both pointed fingers at everyone else. Tomorrow he'd meet Elena at the coffee shop. Tomorrow he'd ask her about Jason Torres and David Marsh, and why her version of events didn't match the timeline in Catherine's files. Tomorrow he'd try to figure out who was lying. But tonight, Ryan sat alone in his apartment and admitted something he'd been avoiding since the elevator had stopped. He had no idea what the truth was anymore. And the deeper he dug, the less sure he became that finding it wouldn't destroy everything he'd been trying to protect. Ryan didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling and listening to the building creak around him, thinking about 2 flash drives hidden in a coffee can and a meeting that could either give him answers or bury him completely. At 5:30 a.m., he gave up pretending, got up, and made coffee that tasted like dirt and regret. Mia found him at the kitchen table an hour later, surrounded by printed spreadsheets he'd been comparing against the files from both Elena and Catherine. "You didn't sleep again," she said, climbing into the chair across from him. "How can you tell?"
Your eyes look scary. Ryan rubbed his face. Scary how? Like when cartoons show someone who stayed up too late and they have those dark circle things. She demonstrated by drawing circles under her own eyes with her fingers. Except yours are real. I'll work on that. Are you still doing the truth thing? The one that makes you look worried? Ryan looked at his daughter and wondered what kind of father brought this kind of stress into their home. What kind of man dragged a 7-year-old into worrying about whether her dad was going to be okay? Yeah, he said. Still doing the truth thing. Is it working? I don't know yet, baby. Mia reached across the table and patted his hand with the kind of serious concern that kids shouldn't have to learn that young. It's okay if it's hard, Daddy. Mom always said you make things harder than they need to be, but I think you just care more than other people. Something in Ryan's chest cracked open. His ex-wife had said that exact thing during one of their last fights, except she'd meant it as an insult. You care too much about everything except us. But Mia had taken those same words and turned them into something that sounded almost like pride. Your mom wasn't wrong about that, Ryan said quietly. I know, but caring isn't bad. Teacher says caring is how we make the world better. Your teacher's right. So you're making the world better? Ryan looked at the spreadsheets scattered across their cheap kitchen table, at the evidence of fraud that could cost him everything, and tried to figure out how to explain to a 7-year-old that making the world better sometimes meant breaking your own life apart. I'm trying, he said. That's all any of us can do. At 11:30, Ryan dropped Mia at Mrs. Chen's and drove to Bennett's coffee shop, a place that looked like it had been decorated sometime in the 1970s and never updated. Cracked vinyl booths, a coffee machine that wheezed when it worked, and a waitress who looked like she'd stopped caring about customer service around the same time the decor had stopped being modern. Elena was already there, sitting in a back booth with her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. She looked different in daylight, smaller somehow, more human. She wore jeans and a plain sweater instead of her usual armor of expensive suits, and her hair was down, which made her look younger and more tired at the same time. Ryan slid into the booth across from her. You're early, she said. So are you. I've been here since 11. Couldn't sit still. She finally looked up at him, and Ryan saw the same thing he'd seen in the elevator, exhaustion that went bone deep. You asked about Jason Torres. Catherine Reeves told me to ask you about him. Elena's jaw tightened. You met with Catherine. She sent me an anonymous email, asked me to meet her in conference room 7B. She gave me files that say you've been lying to me about who's behind the theft. And you believed her? I don't know what I believe. That's why I'm here. Ryan leaned forward. Tell me about Jason Torres. Tell me the truth, Elena, because right now I've got 2 people claiming they're the victim and both of them pointing fingers at everyone else, and I'm the idiot in the middle trying to figure out who's actually stealing from people who can't afford to lose anything. Elena was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful, controlled. Jason Torres was a financial analyst, sharp, good at his job. He noticed the same irregularities you noticed. Started asking questions. Started digging into files he wasn't supposed to access. Like me. Like you. Except Jason went to the wrong person with what he found. He went to David Marsh. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. Your head of security. My head of security, who I've known for 8 years. Who I trusted completely. Elena's hands were shaking around her mug. David told me Jason was making accusations he couldn't prove. Said Jason was becoming erratic, paranoid, talking about conspiracies. A week later, Jason quit, took a job in Seattle. Didn't even give 2 weeks' notice, just packed up and left. Did you talk to him before he left? I tried. He wouldn't take my calls, wouldn't respond to emails. David said Jason had a breakdown, said it was better to let him go quietly rather than force him into some kind of confrontation that would damage his career. And you believed that? Elena's eyes flashed. Yes, I believed it, because at the time I had no reason not to. David had been protecting me and this company since before my father died. He'd never given me a reason to doubt him. Until now, until I saw the files Catherine gave you. Elena pulled out her phone and turned it so Ryan could see the screen. It showed an email chain, communications between David Marsh and Martin Cross about the Torres problem and how they needed to motivate him to relocate before he compromised the structure. Ryan read it twice. Where did you get this? I've been monitoring David's communications for the past month, ever since I started suspecting he might be involved.
These emails are from 2 years ago. They're talking about paying Jason to leave, threatening his career if he didn't, making sure he understood that whatever he thought he'd found, nobody would believe him if he tried to expose it. So, Catherine was telling the truth. David is part of this. David is running this. He's been using his position to control information, eliminate threats, and protect the people actually stealing the money. Elena's voice cracked. He's been lying to me for years. Every time I asked him to investigate something, every time I trusted him to protect this company, he was feeding information to the people robbing it. Ryan sat back in the booth and tried to process what this meant. Catherine said the theft started 4 years ago, before you even suspected anything. It did. David built the Ghost system when he was brought in as head of security. He had access to everything: IT infrastructure, financial databases, personnel records. He knew exactly how to hide what was happening and who to recruit to help him do it. Martin Cross. Martin and at least 3 others, maybe more. I don't have all the names yet. Elena finally picked up her coffee and took a sip like she needed something to do with her hands. Catherine figured it out about 18 months ago. She came to me with concerns about transaction irregularities in her department. I asked David to look into it. He told me Catherine was trying to cover up her own mistakes by creating a false conspiracy. I believed him. Why? Because I'm an idiot who trusted the wrong person. The words came out bitter and raw. Because David knew exactly how to manipulate me. He knew I was young when I took over this company, knew I was scared of making mistakes, knew I needed someone I could rely on to tell me the truth. So he became that person, and then he used that trust to destroy everything my father built. Ryan thought about the files on both flash drives. The timeline that showed David Marsh building the theft infrastructure years before Elena had any idea it existed. The emails showing him coordinating with executives to skim millions from pension funds while employees trusted their retirement money was safe. Catherine tried to tell you, Ryan said, and you didn't believe her. I know. Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. I know I failed her. I know I chose the wrong person to trust. And I know that by the time I figured out what was really happening, Catherine had stopped trying to convince me and started trying to protect herself instead. Is she clean? Based on everything I've found? Yes. She's been trying to stop this for almost 2 years. She's been building her own evidence file, documenting everything, trying to find someone who would listen. And I shut her down every time because David told me she was the problem. The waitress appeared with a pot of burnt-smelling coffee. Both of them waved her away. So what now? Ryan asked. You've got evidence that David's dirty. You know who he's working with. Why haven't you gone to the police, the FBI, anyone? Because I need absolute proof. The kind that can't be dismissed or explained away. David has spent years building plausible deniability into the system. If I go to the authorities with what I have now, he'll claim the evidence was fabricated. He'll say I'm trying to cover up my own incompetence by blaming him. And he's got enough allies inside the company that they'll back him up. What about Catherine's files? They help, but they're not enough. We need a smoking gun, something that directly connects David to the theft in a way he can't deny. Transaction records with his authorization. Communications where he explicitly discusses the fraud. Something irrefutable. Ryan pulled the flash drive Catherine had given him from his pocket and set it on the table between them. She gave me this. Said it has emails from executives ordering the transaction structures, account access logs showing when the Ghost system was built, communications between David, Martin, and board members. Elena stared at the drive like it might explode. Have you looked at everything on it? Most of it. Enough to know that if it's real, David's been running this from the start. If it's real. You think Catherine fabricated it? I think Catherine is smart enough to fabricate anything if it meant protecting herself. Elena reached for the drive, but didn't pick it up. But I also think she's been telling the truth this whole time, and I was too stupid to listen. You weren't stupid. You were lied to by someone you trusted. That's the same thing. Ryan thought about his ex-wife, about how she'd lied for months about being happy while she planned her exit strategy, about how he'd believed her because he'd wanted to believe her, because acknowledging the truth would have meant admitting his marriage was dying and he couldn't stop it. No, he said. It's not the same thing. Trusting someone isn't stupid. It's human. What matters is what you do after you realize they've been lying. Elena picked up the flash drive and turned it over in her hands. I need to verify what's on here. cross-reference it with what I've already found. If Catherine's evidence is legitimate and I combine it with what I've been gathering on David, we might have enough to take this to federal prosecutors. And if we don't, then David destroys the evidence, buries the witnesses, and walks away rich while everyone else loses their pensions and blames the market crash or company mismanagement or anything except the truth. Ryan felt the weight of what they were trying to do settle onto him like something physical. This wasn't just about finding fraud anymore. This was about taking down people with enough power and money to make problems disappear. People who'd already made one auditor vanish and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. "I need to ask you something," Ryan said, "and I need you to be honest with me." "Okay, if this goes bad, if David figures out what we're doing and comes after me, will you actually protect me? Or will I end up like Jason Torres, paid off and shipped somewhere quiet with threats hanging over my head?" Elena met his eyes. "If this goes bad, I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe, but I can't promise it'll be enough. David has resources I don't fully understand yet. He has connections. He knows how to eliminate threats. And if he decides you're too dangerous to let walk away, I don't know if I can stop him." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to Ryan in weeks. "Okay," he said, "then we'd better make sure this doesn't go bad." They spent the next 2 hours in that coffee shop booth going through every file on both flash drives, cross-referencing dates and signatures and transaction codes. The waitress refilled their coffee 3 times with increasing annoyance before giving up and leaving the pot on their table. The evidence painted a clear picture. David Marsh had been recruited by a former board member 4 years ago to help hide what started as a small accounting irregularity. But instead of fixing the problem, David saw an opportunity. He built the ghost system. He brought in Martin Cross and others. He created a structure that could siphon money from pension funds without triggering audits, and he'd been doing it systematically ever since. The theft had accelerated after Elena took over as CEO. David knew she was young, inexperienced, easy to manipulate. He'd positioned himself as her most trusted advisor and then used that position to ensure she never looked too closely at the parts of the company he was robbing. Catherine had noticed the irregularities first because her department processed the pension fund transactions. She'd gone to Elena, been dismissed, and then started building her own case. She'd been documenting everything, waiting for someone who would actually listen. And Jason Torres had been the warning shot. When he got too close, David had removed him, not violently, not dramatically, just efficiently. A job offer in another city. Some money to smooth the transition. Some quiet threats about what would happen if he tried to blow the whistle from Seattle. Jason had taken the deal because he had a family, and a mortgage, and a life he didn't want to lose. Just like Ryan. "We need more than documents," Elena said, staring at the spreadsheet Ryan had built mapping the theft network. "We need testimony. Someone who was actually involved who's willing to talk." "You think any of them will flip?" "Martin Cross might. He's a coward. If he thinks he's going down anyway, he'll make a deal to save himself." "How do we pressure him?" Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Catherine," she said when the line connected. "It's Elena. We need to talk. In person. Today." A pause. "Yes, I've seen the files. Yes, I believe you. And yes, I'm sorry I didn't listen 2 years ago." Another pause. "Bennett's coffee shop, 3 blocks from the office. We're here now." She hung up and looked at Ryan. "She's coming." 20 minutes later, Catherine Reeves walked into the coffee shop looking like she hadn't slept in a week. She slid into the booth next to Elena, keeping her eyes on Ryan like she was trying to decide if bringing him into this had been a mistake. "You verified the files," Catherine said. Not a question. "I did," Elena replied. "You were right about everything. David's been running the theft operation from the beginning. I should have listened to you." "Yeah, you should have." Catherine's voice was flat. Not angry, just exhausted. "But you didn't, and now we're here. So what's the plan?" "We need someone to testify. Someone who was directly involved who can give prosecutors names, dates, transaction details that David can't explain away. You want Martin Cross. He's the weak link. He's been with the company long enough to know where the bodies are buried. But he's not smart enough to have built this system himself. He's a follower, and followers make deals when they get scared." Catherine nodded slowly. "You're going to need leverage, something that makes him more afraid of prison than he is of David. I've got transaction records with Martin's authorization codes all over them. He can't claim he didn't know what was happening. His fingerprints are on millions in theft. That's not enough. David will throw Martin under the bus in a heartbeat if it means saving himself. Martin knows that. He won't flip unless he believes we can actually protect him. Ryan had been quiet, listening to two women who'd been fighting this battle longer than he'd known it existed. But something Catherine said triggered a thought. "What if we don't need Martin to flip?" he said. Both women looked at him. "What if we just need David to think Martin's flipping?" Elena's eyes narrowed. "Keep talking." "David's been controlling information for years, right? Monitoring who talks to who. Making sure nobody compares notes. His whole operation depends on people not communicating outside the channels he controls." Ryan leaned forward. "So what happens if we make him think Martin's having unauthorized meetings with federal investigators?" "David would panic," Catherine said slowly. "He'd either cut Martin loose or try to silence him before he could talk. And either way, we'd have leverage. If David cuts him loose, Martin gets scared and actually does flip. If David tries to silence him, we document the attempt and add witness intimidation to the charges." Elena was staring at Ryan like she was seeing him for the first time. "That's actually smart. Don't sound so surprised. How do we sell it? We can't actually bring in federal investigators without proof they'd take seriously." Ryan thought about the files scattered across his kitchen table, about the map he'd built of the theft network, about 2 flash drives full of evidence that told a story prosecutors would understand. "We don't bring in real investigators," he said. "We fake it. We make Martin think he's being watched. We leave just enough evidence that David picks up on it, and then we sit back and watch them turn on each other." Catherine shook her head. "That's too risky. If David figures out we're running a con, he buries everything and we lose our chance. We're going to lose our chance anyway if we don't do something soon. How long before David realizes I've been accessing files I shouldn't have? How long before he connects the dots and figures out you and Elena are working together?" Ryan looked at both of them. "We're out of time for the safe play. We need to force this into the open before David locks everything down." Elena drummed her fingers on the table, thinking. "We'd need to be careful. Make it look organic, like Martin's getting nervous on his own and reaching out for protection." "I can help with that," Catherine said. "I still have access to internal communications. I can send Martin some carefully worded emails that suggest I know more than I should, that I'm documenting everything, that I've been talking to people outside the company. He'll run straight to David." "Exactly. And when he does, David will start watching Martin more closely, looking for signs he's breaking ranks. And once David's paranoid about Martin, we can push a little harder." Ryan pulled out his notebook and started sketching out a timeline. "How fast can you send those emails?" "Today, if you want." "Do it. Make them subtle but clear enough that Martin can't ignore them. Then we wait and see how he reacts. And if he doesn't react, then we escalate. Ryan's been doing legitimate audit work. If he suddenly finds a discrepancy in Martin's department and files an official report, Martin will panic. He'll either go to David for help or he'll try to cover his tracks. And either way, we'll know which direction he's leaning." Elena nodded slowly. "This could work. It's insane, but it could work." "It's definitely insane," Catherine agreed, "but we're past the point of sane options." They spent another hour mapping out exactly how to bait the trap. Catherine would send the emails. Ryan would continue his normal audit work, but start asking pointed questions about Martin's department. Elena would monitor communications for any signs that David was getting suspicious, and then they'd wait for someone to break. Ryan drove home that afternoon with his head spinning and his hands shaking on the steering wheel. He'd just agreed to run a con against a man who'd already made one auditor disappear. He was betting his life and his daughter's future on the hope that desperate men made stupid mistakes. Mrs. Chen took one look at him when he picked up Mia and said, "You look worse than this morning." "Thanks, that's helpful. I'm serious, Ryan. Whatever you're doing, be smart about it. That girl needs her father." "I know." "Do you? Because you look like a man who's about to do something heroic and stupid." Ryan glanced at Mia, who was showing him a drawing she'd made of what looked like either a dog or a very hairy cloud. "I'm trying to do the right thing." "The right thing and the smart thing aren't always the same." "I know that too." That night, after Mia was asleep, Ryan got an email from Catherine with the subject line "Sent." Inside was a forwarded chain showing the messages she'd sent to Martin Cross. Carefully worded concerns about transaction irregularities, questions about account authorizations, suggestions that certain activities might not withstand external scrutiny. Nothing explicitly accusatory. Nothing Martin could point to as a direct threat, but enough to make him nervous if he was guilty, which he was. Ryan's phone buzzed. A text from Elena. Catherine's emails hit Martin's inbox an hour ago. He forwarded them to David within 10 minutes. It's working. Ryan stared at that message for a long time. They'd set something in motion that couldn't be stopped now. David knew someone was asking questions. Martin knew his name was coming up in uncomfortable contexts. And somewhere in that tower of glass and steel, two guilty men were trying to figure out how to protect themselves. The question was whether they'd turn on each other or circle the wagons. Ryan would find out soon enough. He put his phone down and walked to Mia's room, standing in the doorway and watching his daughter sleep. She looked so small in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals that had seen better days and drawings taped to the walls. She trusted him to keep her safe, to make good decisions, to be the kind of father who didn't bring danger into their home. And here he was, running a con against corporate thieves who wouldn't hesitate to destroy him if they felt threatened. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered to the darkness. "I'm trying to do this right." Mia didn't answer, just kept sleeping, peaceful and unaware that her father had just painted a target on both their backs. Ryan went back to his laptop and pulled up the files one more time, studied the evidence, checked his work, made sure everything was documented and backed up in places David couldn't reach. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He wrote a letter to his ex-wife. Not to send, just to write. Just to put words to the thing he'd been avoiding since the elevator had stopped and Elena had told him the truth about what was really happening at Vale Industries. The letter said, "If something happens to me, make sure Mia knows I was trying to help people. Make sure she knows that sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and it's still worth doing. Make sure she knows I loved her more than I was afraid." He saved the letter in a folder labeled "For Mia" and hoped she'd never have to read it. Then Ryan Carter, a broke single father with $600 in his bank account and a daughter who drew pictures of hairy clouds, went to bed and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. But sleep didn't come. Just the sound of the building settling, the distant traffic, and the quiet, persistent voice in his head saying he'd already gone too far to turn back now. So he might as well see it through to the end, whatever that end turned out to be. Martin Cross started making mistakes on the third day after Catherine's emails hit his inbox. Ryan noticed it first during a routine check of departmental expense reports. Martin had always been meticulous about documentation, every receipt matched, every approval properly logged, every number clean enough to pass any audit without question. But the report Ryan pulled on Thursday morning had errors, small ones, a decimal point in the wrong place, a duplicate entry that should have been caught, an authorization code that didn't match the transaction date, the kind of mistakes people made when they were distracted, when they were scared. Ryan flagged the errors in his audit notes and sent a polite email to Martin's assistant requesting clarification. Nothing accusatory, just standard procedure, the kind of thing that happened a dozen times a day in a company this size. Martin responded within 5 minutes. The email was too long, too defensive, too eager to explain away discrepancies that Ryan hadn't even questioned yet. Martin blamed the errors on a new accounting software update, on an assistant who'd been out sick, on end-of-quarter processing delays. He provided 3 times more documentation than Ryan had asked for, like he was trying to bury the question under an avalanche of proof that everything was fine. Ryan forwarded the email to Elena with a single line. "He's rattled." Her response came back, "Good. Push a little harder." So Ryan did. He sent another email, this one asking about a pension fund transaction from 6 months ago that showed up in Martin's department approval logs. The transaction was clean, nothing suspicious about it on the surface. But Ryan phrased the question in a way that suggested he was looking at a pattern, not an isolated incident. "I'm reviewing historical pension fund allocations as part of the annual compliance audit. Could you provide the supporting documentation for transaction reference 7734-MM-0847? Also, if you have time, I'd like to understand the approval process for these types of fund transfers. Just want to make sure I'm documenting everything correctly for the final report." The reference number was one of the ghost accounts Elena had flagged. The MM code was Martin's department identifier. And the phrase "final report" suggested Ryan was building towards something official. Martin didn't respond for 6 hours. When he finally did, the email was short and cold. That transaction was processed according to standard protocols. All documentation is available through the central database. If you have specific compliance concerns, please direct them through proper channels. Translation: stop asking questions. Ryan showed the email to Elena during a brief meeting in a Starbucks 4 blocks from the office. They'd stopped meeting anywhere near Vail Industries after Elena noticed David Marsh's security team doing spot checks of the building's conference rooms. "He's stonewalling," Elena said, reading Martin's response on Ryan's phone. "That's not how he normally handles audit requests. He's usually over-cooperative, gives you everything you ask for and then some. So he knows I'm onto something." He knows someone's onto something. Question is whether he thinks it's you acting alone or you working with someone else. Ryan sipped his coffee, which was better than the burnt sludge at Bennett's but still tasted like anxiety. What's David doing? Getting paranoid. He's increased monitoring of internal communications. Started having private meetings with Martin and 2 other executives I haven't been able to identify yet. And yesterday he asked me point blank if I'd hired any outside investigators. What did you tell him? That I hadn't, which is technically true. You're an inside contractor, not an outside investigator. Elena's smile was thin. He didn't look convinced. How long before he connects the dots? Not long, maybe a week if we're lucky. Days if we're not. Then we need to move faster. We need Martin to break before David locks everything down. Elena pulled out her own phone and showed Ryan a message she'd received that morning. It was from Catherine, forwarded from an anonymous internal source. Martin requested an emergency meeting with legal yesterday, asked about whistleblower protections and what kind of immunity deals prosecutors typically offer in corporate fraud cases. Ryan felt his pulse kick up. He's thinking about flipping. He's thinking about it. Doesn't mean he'll actually do it. Martin's a coward, but he's also been stealing alongside David for 4 years. That's a lot of shared guilt, a lot of mutual destruction if one of them talks. So we make him more afraid of David than he is of prosecutors. How? Ryan thought about the con they were running, about the trap they'd set, about desperate men and the stupid mistakes they made when they felt the walls closing in. We make David think Martin's already talking, he said. Elena's eyes narrowed. That's dangerous. If David believes Martin's actually cooperating with investigators, he'll do whatever it takes to shut him up. And whatever it takes might include things we can't protect Martin from. But if Martin knows David's coming after him, his only option is to actually flip, to get real protection from real prosecutors before David can silence him. You're talking about using Martin as bait. I'm talking about forcing both of them into a corner where the only way out is to turn on each other. Ryan leaned forward. Right now, they're both trying to figure out if they can ride this out. If they can keep the lie going just a little longer, we need to make them believe the lie is already dead, that the only question left is who goes down with it. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at her coffee like it might have answers. When she looked up, there was something hard in her expression, something that looked like the ice queen of private equity, making a decision that would hurt people but had to be made anyway. Okay, she said, let's burn it down. That afternoon, Ryan filed an official audit discrepancy report flagging 3 transactions in Martin Cross's department for further review. The report was standard procedure, nothing that would normally raise alarms. But Ryan made sure to copy it to compliance, to legal, and to Elena's office. He also made sure it contained enough specific details about account numbers and approval codes that anyone reading it carefully would recognize the ghost system's fingerprints. Martin would see it. David would see it. And both of them would know that Ryan wasn't just asking random questions anymore. He was building a case. 2 hours later, Ryan's access to the internal database was revoked. The notification came through email from IT. Your system privileges have been temporarily suspended pending a security review. Please contact your supervisor for additional information. Ryan called the IT help desk. They told him the suspension came from David Marsh's office. Standard security protocol when contractors accessed sensitive files outside their assigned scope. Standard protocol that had never been applied to Ryan before. He texted Elena. David just cut my access. He knows. Her response, stay calm. This actually helps us. It makes you look like a legitimate threat. When Martin sees you've been flagged by security, he'll panic. What if David does more than cut my access? Then we move to plan B. What's plan B? I'm still working on that. Ryan sat at his desk in his cube on the 14th floor and tried to look like a man who wasn't currently watching his professional life implode. His neighbors didn't look at him, but he could feel their awareness,
could feel the shift in the air that happened when someone got flagged by security and everyone else suddenly remembered they had their own careers to protect.
At 4:47 p.m., Martin Cross walked past Ryan's cube. Didn't stop. Didn't look. Just walked past like Ryan was invisible. Except Martin never walked through this section of the floor. His office was on 16. He had no reason to be here unless he wanted to see Ryan for himself. Unless he wanted to confirm that the auditor asking uncomfortable questions was real and present and potentially dangerous. Ryan kept his eyes on his monitor, pretending to work on files he could no longer access, and counted the seconds until Martin disappeared around the corner. Then he pulled out his phone and typed a message to the group chat he'd started with Elena and Catherine. Martin just did a visual confirmation. He's assessing the threat level. Catherine's response came first. Good. Let him assess. I just sent him another email asking about documentation for overseas investment accounts. Copied compliance and legal on it. Like it's routine. He's going to lose his mind. Elena. David requested a meeting with me for tomorrow morning. Said it's urgent. About personnel security concerns. Ryan. He's going to ask you about me. Elena. I know. I'll tell him you've been doing exactly what you were hired to do. That if he has concerns about your work, he should file a formal complaint through proper channels. Catherine. That'll make him even more paranoid. He'll think you're protecting Ryan on purpose. Elena. That's the idea. Ryan stared at the group chat and felt the machinery of the trap clicking into place. They were pushing Martin and David toward each other, creating pressure that would either make one of them break or make both of them do something stupid enough to expose themselves. The question was which would happen first. That night, Ryan got home to find Mia sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen, both of them looking at him with expressions he couldn't quite read. What happened? He asked. A man came by this afternoon, Mrs. Chen said. Asked if you lived here. Asked about your daughter. Asked when you usually got home from work. Ryan's blood went cold. What did he look like? Tall. Expensive suit. Had that look people get when they're used to being listened to. Mrs. Chen's voice was steady, but her eyes were sharp. I told him you weren't available and he should contact you through proper channels. He left a business card. She handed Ryan a card. Plain white, no company logo, just a name, David Marsh, and a phone number. Ryan felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. Did he talk to Mia? He tried. I shut that down fast, told him if he had business with you, it didn't involve questioning a child. Ryan looked at his daughter, who was watching him with those too aware eyes. Baby, did that man say anything to you? He asked if my daddy was a good man, Mia said quietly. I told him you were the best man I knew. Something in Ryan's chest cracked. He pulled Mia into a hug that was probably too tight, but he couldn't help it. David Marsh had come to his home, had talked to his daughter, had made this personal in a way that crossed every line Ryan had tried to keep between his work and his family. Mrs. Chen, Ryan said, his voice barely controlled, I need you to do me a favor. What kind of favor? If anyone comes around again asking about me or Mia, anyone at all, you call the police first and me second. And you don't let Mia out of your sight until I get here. Mrs. Chen studied his face. You're in trouble. I'm trying to stop some people from doing something very wrong, and they just made it clear they're willing to threaten my daughter to make me stop looking. Then maybe you should stop looking. I can't, not now. Why not? Because hundreds of families were being robbed. Because Jason Torres had been scared into silence and no one had fought for him. Because if Ryan walked away now, David Marsh would know that threatening kids was an effective strategy and he'd use it again and again. Because Ryan had a daughter who'd told a dangerous man that her father was a good man, and he needed to prove she wasn't wrong. Because it's too late, Ryan said. I'm already in, and the only way out is through. Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. Then you be careful, and you remember that brave and stupid look an awful lot alike from the outside. After she left, Ryan sat Mia down and tried to figure out how to explain to a 7-year-old that the world was more complicated and dangerous than he'd wanted her to know. That man who came today, Ryan started. He's trying to scare me, trying to make me stop doing my job. But I need you to understand something, baby. No matter what happens, no matter who comes around asking questions, you don't talk to anyone about what I do or where I go or who I talk to, okay? Is he a bad man? Yeah, he is. Are you fighting him? Sort of. Are you going to win? Ryan looked at his daughter and wanted to promise her that everything would be okay, that the good guys always won and justice always prevailed and fathers who fought for the right thing always came home safe. But he'd learned a long time ago that lying to kids didn't protect them. It just made them trust you less when the truth came out. I don't know, he said honestly, but I'm going to try really hard. Mia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Derek's dad left and never came back. Derek says his dad just got tired of them and went away. Are you going to go away? No, baby. I'm not going anywhere. You promise? Ryan wanted to promise. Wanted to tell her that nothing could take him away from her. But David Marsh had come to their home and talked to his daughter, and that changed the calculus of what promises he could keep. I promise I'm going to do everything I can to stay with you, he said. And I promise that no matter what happens, you're the most important thing in my life. Nothing is more important than you. Not my job, not being right, nothing. It wasn't the promise she wanted, but it was the only one he could give. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ryan called Elena. David came to my apartment, he said when she answered. He talked to my daughter. Elena was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tight with anger. What did he say to her? Asked if I was a good man. Left his business card with my neighbor like he was making a friendly visit instead of a threat. He's trying to rattle you, trying to make you back off. It's working. Ryan, no, listen to me. I've got a 7-year-old kid who just asked me if I was going to leave and never come back, because that's what happened to her friend's dad. I can't, his voice cracked. I can't put her through that. I can't risk her losing another parent because I wanted to be a hero. You're not being a hero. You're doing what's right. Those things aren't always the same. Mrs. Chen told me that. She was right. Elena didn't respond immediately. Ryan could hear her breathing on the other end of the line, could imagine her in her expensive apartment with her expensive view, trying to figure out how to convince a broke single father that risking everything was worth it. If you want out, she said finally, I understand. I'll make sure David leaves you alone. I'll handle this another way. There is no other way. We both know that. Then what do you want me to tell you? Ryan looked at the bedroom where his daughter was sleeping, at the apartment that was falling apart around him, at the life he'd built from nothing after his wife left, fragile and precious, and one bad decision away from collapsing completely. Tell me that if this goes wrong, you'll make sure Mia's taken care of, he said. Tell me that if David does something to me, you won't let my daughter pay the price for my choices. Ryan, promise me, Elena, because that's the only way I can keep doing this, the only way I can see it through. I promise, she said quietly. If anything happens to you, I'll make sure Mia's protected. I'll make sure she has everything she needs. You have my word. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Okay, Ryan said. Then let's finish this. The next morning, Ryan showed up at Vail Industries at 7 a.m. with a flash drive full of evidence and a plan that was either brilliant or suicidal. He badged in through the main entrance, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and walked straight to Martin Cross's office. Martin's assistant tried to stop him. Mr. Cross isn't available right now. Tell him Ryan Carter is here to discuss the pension fund audit. Tell him I have documentation he's going to want to see before it goes to federal prosecutors. The assistant's face went pale. She picked up her phone and spoke in a voice too quiet for Ryan to hear. 30 seconds later, Martin's office door opened. Mr. Carter, Martin said, his smile not even pretending to be friendly. This is unexpected. We need to talk, privately. Martin glanced at his assistant. Hold my calls. Then to Ryan, come in. Ryan stepped into an office that was all dark wood and leather and the kind of expensive minimalism that screamed success without saying anything about the person who worked there. Martin closed the door and didn't offer Ryan a seat. What's this about? Martin asked. Ryan pulled out the flash drive and set it on Martin's desk. That contains every transaction you've authorized through the Ghost system for the past 4 years. Every shell corporation, every redirected pension fund payment, every piece of documentation that proves you've been stealing from employees who trusted this company to protect their retirement. Martin didn't touch the drive, didn't look at it, just kept his eyes on Ryan's face like he was trying to read whether this was a bluff. I don't know what you think you found, Martin said carefully, but making accusations like that is extremely serious, career-ending even. I'm not making accusations. I'm stating facts. You and David Marsh have been running a systematic theft operation for 4 years. You've stolen somewhere between $30 and $40 million, and I have proof. If you had proof, you'd take it to prosecutors, not to me. I'm taking it to you first because I'm giving you a chance David won't give you. Martin's expression flickered, just for a second, just long enough for Ryan to see the fear underneath the corporate mask. What chance is that? The chance to flip before he throws you under the bus. You're not the architect of this, Martin. You're middle management. You followed orders from people above you. That's a defense prosecutors will listen to if you cooperate. You're asking me to betray David. I'm telling you David's already planning to betray you. Catherine's been documenting everything for 2 years. Elena knows the whole structure. And I've been building a case that federal investigators will take seriously. When this breaks, and it's going to break, David will make sure you're the one who takes the fall. He'll claim you went rogue, that he tried to stop you, that he's as much a victim as anyone. Martin sat down in his chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. You're bluffing. Check the drive. Look at the evidence. Then tell me I'm bluffing. Martin stared at the flash drive like it might bite him. What do you want? I want you to testify. I want you to give prosecutors everything you know about how the ghost system works, who built it, who authorized it, and where the money went. And I want you to do it before David makes you disappear the way he made Jason Torres disappear. Jason took a job in Seattle. David didn't make him disappear. Is that what you tell yourself? That Jason just happened to quit right when he started asking questions? That he just happened to take a job offer in another city right when David needed him gone? Martin's hands were shaking. Ryan could see them trembling against the armrests of his expensive chair. If I testify, Martin said quietly, David will destroy me. If you don't testify, you'll go to prison for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. And you'll go alone while David walks away free. Ryan leaned forward. I'm offering you a way out, the only way out, but it expires the second I walk out of this office. Because if you don't take this deal, I'm taking everything I have straight to the FBI, and you'll be just another name on the indictment. You can't protect me from David. Elena can. She's the CEO. She has resources, she has connections, and she has a vested interest in making sure witnesses stay alive long enough to testify. Martin looked at Ryan with eyes that were desperate and calculating at the same time. How do I know this isn't a trap? How do I know you and Elena aren't working with David to test my loyalty? Because if we were, we'd already have everything we need. David doesn't need your cooperation. He needs your silence. And the way you guarantee silence is by making examples of people who talk. Ryan picked up the flash drive and put it back in his pocket. You've got until end of business today to decide. After that, the offer's off the table and you're on your own. He walked to the door, put his hand on the handle, turned back. One more thing, Martin. David came to my apartment yesterday. He talked to my 7-year-old daughter. He's making this personal because he's scared. And when David's scared, he stops being careful. That's when he makes mistakes. That's when people get hurt. Ryan opened the door. Don't be the person who gets hurt because you were too scared to do the right thing. He left before Martin could respond. Ryan's hands didn't start shaking until he was back in the elevator, riding down to the lobby with his heart hammering in his chest and his mind racing through all the ways the conversation could have gone wrong. Martin could call David right now, could tell him everything Ryan had said, could set in motion whatever plan David had for dealing with threats. Or Martin could sit in his office staring at his desk and realizing that the walls were closing in and the only way out was to turn on the man who'd made him complicit in the first place. Ryan's phone buzzed. Elena. Did you do it? Ryan. Yeah. Elena. How'd he react? Ryan. He's scared. Question is whether he's more scared of David or prosecutors. Elena. We'll know soon enough. Catherine just got word that David scheduled an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. No agenda listed. Ryan. He's circling the wagons. Elena. Or he's preparing to cut someone loose. Either way, things are about to move fast. Ryan stepped out of the building into morning air that felt too cold for late spring and tried to figure out what happened next. He just threatened a VP. He just offered an immunity deal he had no authority to offer. He just bet everything on the hope that Martin Cross would choose self-preservation over loyalty. And somewhere in that building, David Marsh was making his own calculations about how to protect the empire he'd built on stolen money and broken trust. Ryan walked to the subway, rode it home, picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's, made her lunch, helped her with homework, did all the normal things normal fathers did with their daughters on normal weekdays, and waited for the call that would tell him whether he'd just saved hundreds of families or destroyed his own. The call came at 3:47 p.m. Elena's voice was tight. Martin went to legal this morning, filed a formal whistleblower complaint. He's talking. Ryan felt something that might have been relief or might have been terror. What did he give them? Everything. Names, dates, account numbers. He's been documenting his own involvement as insurance for the past 2 years. He's got emails from David, communications with board members, transaction authorizations that prove the theft was sanctioned from the top. Is it enough? It's enough to start a federal investigation. It's enough to freeze accounts and seize records. It's enough to destroy David's ability to cover this up. Ryan sat down on his couch because his legs wouldn't hold him anymore. What happens now? Now we wait for David to realize what Martin's done, and then we see how he reacts. Elena, I know it's dangerous. I know David's going to fight back. But we did it, Ryan. We forced the break. We made Martin choose truth over loyalty, and now the whole thing is going to collapse. Ryan thought about his daughter in the next room, about David Marsh coming to their apartment, about brave and stupid looking an awful lot alike from the outside. Make sure Martin's protected, Ryan said. Whatever it takes. Don't let David get to him before he can testify. I will, I promise. Elena hung up. Ryan sat on his couch in his falling apart apartment and waited for the world to catch fire. It took 3 hours. The emergency board meeting lasted 47 minutes, and by the time it ended, David Marsh had stopped returning phone calls. Elena texted Ryan at 6:32 p.m. David knows he tried to get the board to suspend Martin pending an internal investigation. Catherine and I blocked it. Told them Martin's complaint triggers mandatory federal reporting requirements. David walked out before the vote. Ryan was sitting on his fire escape watching the street below, looking for cars that stayed too long, or faces that appeared too often. His phone buzzed again. Elena, he's going to run or he's going to fight. Either way, tonight's going to be bad. Ryan called her. Where's Martin now? Corporate attorney's office. Catherine's with him. They're preparing his formal statement for federal prosecutors. Is he safe there? As safe as anywhere. Building security is on alert. But Ryan, David has resources we don't fully understand. He's been building this operation for 4 years. He has contacts, money, places to hide evidence, or people, or make people disappear. Yeah. Ryan looked through the window at Mia, who was watching cartoons on their old television and eating cereal for dinner because he'd been too distracted to cook. What do you need me to do? Stay where you are. Keep your daughter close. If David comes after anyone tonight, it'll be Martin or me. You're a contractor. You're not worth the risk to him. He came to my apartment, Elena. He talked to my kid. I'm already a risk to him. Then lock your door and don't answer it for anyone. I'll call you when this is over. She hung up before Ryan could argue. He went inside, locked the door, checked the windows, and tried to act normal while his daughter watched cartoons and asked why he kept looking at his phone. Work stuff, baby. You always say that. Because it's always true. Mia studied him with those eyes that saw too much. Are you scared? A little bit. Me too. Ryan sat down next to her on the couch. Why are you scared? Because you are. And when grown-ups are scared, it means something really bad might happen. He pulled her close. Sometimes grown-ups are scared because we care about things, because we're trying to protect people. And yes, that means something could go wrong, but it also means we're doing something that matters. Is what you're doing going to help people? I think so. I hope so. Then I hope you don't get hurt doing it. Ryan kissed the top of her head and wished he could promise her that everything would be fine, that the bad people would lose and the good people would win and the world worked the way it did in the cartoon she was watching. But he'd stopped believing in those kinds of endings a long time ago. His phone rang at 8:15 p.m. Unknown number. Ryan answered. Yeah? Mr. Carter. David Marsh's voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm people forced when they were barely holding it together. We should talk. I don't think we have anything to talk about. I think we have quite a bit to talk about. You've been making some serious accusations, interfering with company operations, convincing employees to file false reports. Martin's report isn't false, and you know it. What I know is that you're a contractor who's overstepped his authority, who's been accessing files he shouldn't have access to, who's been working with people who have their own agendas. People like the CEO. David's laugh was cold. Elena's a child playing dress-up in her father's company. She has no idea how things actually work, how they've always worked, how they need to work to survive. You mean how you've been stealing from people who trusted you? I mean how I've been keeping this company profitable when Elena's idealism would have run it into the ground. Do you know how many employees would have lost their jobs if I hadn't restructured the pension obligations? How many families would have been destroyed? Ryan felt rage cut through his fear. You're not restructuring, you're stealing, and you're not doing it to save jobs. You're doing it because you could, because you had access and opportunity and you didn't think anyone would catch you. No one would have caught me if you hadn't stuck your nose where it didn't belong. Jason Torres caught you. That's why you paid him to disappear. David was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the calm was gone. Jason was a problem that got solved, just like you're a problem that's going to get solved. Is that a threat? It's a reality. You have a daughter, Mr. Carter, a little girl who depends on you, who needs her father to be alive and present. Think very carefully about whether exposing something that's already being handled is worth putting her future at risk. Ryan's hand tightened on the phone. You come near my daughter again and You'll what? You're broke. You're nobody. You're a failed husband living in a failing apartment trying to pretend you're some kind of hero. But heroes need resources, Mr. Carter. They need power. And you have neither. I have the truth. The truth is, whatever story gets believed, and my story is a lot more believable than yours. David's voice got quieter. More dangerous. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Elena. You're going to tell her you made a mistake, that you misinterpreted the data, that you're withdrawing your audit findings. Then you're going to resign your contract and disappear back into whatever hole you crawled out of. And if I don't, then I make a phone call and your daughter's mother gets an emergency custody petition filed tomorrow morning. Allegations that you're mentally unstable, that you're involving your child in dangerous situations, that you're an unfit parent. It won't matter if it's true. By the time the court sort it out, Mia will be living with her mother and you'll be fighting an uphill battle to get supervised visitation. Ryan felt like he'd been gutted. You can't do that. I can do whatever I need to do. That's what you never understood. People like me don't play by the rules. People like you think matter. We make the rules. And we break them when it's convenient. Elena will stop you. Elena can't even stop me from walking out of this company with enough evidence to bury everyone who stood against me. She's in over her head, and so are you. The line went dead. Ryan sat on his couch, shaking with anger and fear and the horrible understanding that David was right about one thing. Ryan had no power, no money, no resources to fight back against a man who'd been playing this game for years. All he had was the truth and a daughter sleeping in the next room who trusted him to keep her safe. He called Elena. She answered on the first ring. Did David call you? How did you know? Because he's been making calls all night, trying to threaten people into silence. What did he say? Ryan told her. All of it. The accusations, the threats, the custody petition. Elena was quiet when he finished. He's bluffing, she said finally. What if he's not? Then we move faster. We get Martin's testimony to federal prosecutors tonight. We lock down the evidence before David can destroy it. We make this public before he can threaten anyone else. Elena, he threatened my daughter. I know, and I'm sorry. But if you back down now, he wins. He gets away with stealing $40 million. He destroys Martin for testifying. And he does this again and again because he knows threats work. Ryan looked at Mia's bedroom door. I can't lose her. You won't. I promise you, Ryan. Whatever David tries, I will fight him with every resource I have. But I need you to trust me. I need you to stay the course just a little bit longer. How much longer? Hours. Federal investigators are already reviewing Martin's complaint. They're issuing subpoenas for company records tonight. By morning, David's accounts will be frozen and his communications will be monitored. He's got a window to run or fight, and that window's closing fast. Ryan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the system would work the way it was supposed to, that powerful men who broke the rules actually faced consequences. But he'd seen too much of the world to believe in justice without evidence. "Okay," he said, "but if David makes one move toward Mia, I'm pulling her out of school and disappearing. I don't care about the case. I don't care about the truth. I care about my daughter." "I understand." "Do you?" "Because you don't have kids, Elena. You don't know what it's like to have someone threaten the only thing in the world that actually matters." She was quiet for a long moment. "You're right. I don't know what that's like. But I know what it's like to have someone you trust destroy everything you believed in. And I know what it's like to be too scared to fight back until it's almost too late." Her voice got stronger. "So trust me when I say we're going to finish this. We're going to make David answer for what he's done. And we're going to make sure he never threatens another person's child again." Ryan wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it wasn't that simple, that revenge wasn't the same as justice and fighting back wasn't the same as winning. But he was too tired, too scared, too far into this to turn back now. "Call me when it's over," he said. "I will." Ryan spent the next 3 hours sitting in his dark apartment, jumping at every sound, checking his phone every 5 minutes and trying not to think about all the ways this could still go wrong. At 11:47 p.m., his phone buzzed with a news alert. Federal investigators raid Vail Industries headquarters. Multiple arrests expected. Ryan's hand shook as he opened the article. The details were sparse. Federal agents had entered the building at 10:30 p.m. with warrants to seize financial records related to an ongoing fraud investigation. Employees had been escorted from the building. No arrests had been made yet, but sources indicated that several executives were being questioned. His phone rang. "Elena." "It's happening," she said. Her voice sounded hollow, exhausted. "FBI showed up with warrants. They're seizing servers, freezing accounts, interviewing anyone who had access to the pension fund systems." "Where's David?" "Gone. He left the building 3 hours ago, hasn't been seen since." "He ran." "Looks that way. Federal marshals have a warrant for his arrest. They've got alerts at airports, train stations, border crossings. He won't get far." Ryan felt something that wasn't quite relief. "What about Martin?" "He's cooperating fully, gave investigators everything. They're using his testimony to build cases against the other executives involved. It's going to take time, but they've got enough to prosecute." "And the stolen money?" "They're tracing it. Most of it went into offshore accounts David controlled. Some of it was distributed to the other conspirators. The FBI thinks they can recover about 60%, maybe more if they can seize David's assets before he moves them." 60%. Ryan thought about the families who'd been counting on that money for retirement, about the 40% that might be gone forever because the system hadn't caught this sooner. "That's not enough," he said. "I know, but it's better than nothing. And the company's going to make restitution for the rest. It'll take years, but we're going to make people whole." "What about you?" Elena laughed, but it sounded broken. "I'm the CEO who didn't notice $40 million being stolen from her own company for 4 years. The board's calling for my resignation. Shareholders are threatening lawsuits, and the press is going to destroy me when this goes public tomorrow." "It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I trusted David. I ignored Catherine. I didn't ask enough questions or look closely enough at things that should have been obvious. People lost their retirement because I was too inexperienced and too scared to see what was happening right in front of me." Ryan heard the pain in her voice and recognized it because he'd felt the same thing when his marriage fell apart. The weight of knowing you'd missed something important, that you'd trusted the wrong person, that people you cared about got hurt because you weren't careful enough or smart enough or strong enough to protect them. "You're going to rebuild," he said. "You're going to fix the systems that let this happen. You're going to make sure it never happens again. That's not failure, Elena. That's just learning the hard way." "Is that what you did? After your wife left? I'm still learning, still failing, still trying to figure out how to be the kind of father my daughter deserves." Ryan looked at Mia's closed bedroom door. "But I'm showing up. Every day. Even when it's hard. Even when I'm scared. That's all any of us can do." Elena was quiet. Then, "Thank you, Ryan, for everything. For being willing to look when everyone else turned away. For risking everything to help people you'd never met. For being stupid enough to think one person could actually make a difference." "Did we? Make a difference?" Yeah, we did. It cost more than it should have, and it's messier than I wanted, but we stopped them. We exposed the truth, and a lot of families are going to get their money back because you wouldn't walk away. Ryan closed his eyes and felt something that might have been pride or might have been grief. They'd won. Sort of. In the complicated, imperfect way that real victories happened in the real world. What happens to you now, he asked. I resign tomorrow. Let the board bring in someone who doesn't have my baggage. Someone who can rebuild trust. That's not fair. Probably not, but it's necessary. The company needs a fresh start, and I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to live up to my father's legacy. She paused. What about you? I don't know. My contract's gone. My reputation in this industry is probably shot, but Mia's safe. That's what matters. Ryan, yeah? I'm going to make sure you land somewhere good. You have skills, you have integrity, and you just helped take down one of the biggest corporate fraud schemes in the state. That means something. To who? To me, and to a lot of other people once this story comes out. Elena's voice got firmer. You're not walking away from this with nothing. I won't let that happen. Ryan wanted to tell her not to worry about him, that he'd figure it out the way he always figured it out. But the truth was he was broke and scared and had no idea what came next. So he just said, thank you. Get some sleep, Ryan. Tomorrow's going to be intense. She hung up. Ryan sat in the dark and tried to process everything that had happened. 2 weeks ago, he'd been a struggling contractor trying to pay rent. Now he was part of a federal fraud investigation that was going to be all over the news. He'd helped expose corruption. He'd protected hundreds of families. He'd done something that mattered, and he had absolutely no idea how he was going to pay next month's rent. The irony wasn't lost on him. David Marsh was arrested 48 hours later trying to board a private flight to the Cayman Islands. The FBI found him at a small airport in New Jersey with 2 suitcases full of cash and a passport that wasn't his. He was charged with fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, witness tampering, and about 15 other crimes that Ryan didn't fully understand but knew added up to the rest of David's life being spent in prison. Martin Cross testified in exchange for immunity and a plea deal that kept him out of jail but destroyed his career. 2 other executives took similar deals. The board members who'd been involved quietly resigned, and the whole ugly structure that David had built collapsed like the house of cards it had always been. The press coverage was brutal. Elena's face was on every news channel, every financial website, every business magazine. Some called her incompetent. Some called her a victim. Some suggested she'd known all along and was only acting shocked to protect herself. She resigned 3 weeks after the FBI raid, gave a press conference where she took full responsibility for failing to protect her employees, and announced she was creating a foundation to help the families whose pensions had been stolen. Ryan watched the press conference from his apartment and felt something complicated and sad. Elena looked smaller on TV, more human, like the weight she'd been carrying had finally crushed the CEO persona and left just a woman trying to do the right thing after everything had gone wrong. She called him that night. I saw you watching, she said. How did you know? Because you texted me 3 seconds after I walked off the stage. Ryan had texted, You did good. Don't let them tell you otherwise. I meant it, he said. I know. That's why it mattered. Elena sighed. I've been thinking about what you said about showing up, about trying even when you're scared. Yeah? I'm starting over. Not at another company, not in finance. I'm going to work on the foundation full-time, help rebuild what got destroyed, make sure the systems that failed actually get fixed. That's going to take years. I know. But I've got time, and I've got motivation, and I've got a pretty good example of what it looks like to fight for something even when the odds are terrible. Ryan felt his throat tighten. I'm not an example of anything. You're a single father who risked everything to help strangers, who stood up to people with more power and more money because it was the right thing to do, who protected his daughter while protecting hundreds of other people's futures. Elena's voice got quieter. That's not nothing, Ryan. That's actually everything. 3 months later, Ryan got a job offer from a nonprofit organization that investigated corporate fraud. The salary was better than his contractor work had been. The benefits included health insurance that actually covered things, and the work involved using his accounting skills to help people instead of just balancing books for companies that didn't care about anything except their bottom line. He took the job. Mia noticed the difference immediately. Not in what they had. The apartment was still falling apart. The car was still broken. The furniture was still secondhand, but in how Ryan carried himself. He stood straighter, smiled more, stopped looking at his phone like it might deliver bad news at any second. "You're not scared anymore," she said one night over dinner that was actually cooked instead of reheated. "I'm still scared sometimes, but not the same way." What's different? Ryan thought about that. About the difference between being scared you'd lose everything and being scared you wouldn't do enough. About fear that paralyzed versus fear that motivated. "I guess I'm scared of different things now," he said. "I used to be scared of failing, of losing you, of not being good enough. And I'm still scared of those things. But now I'm also scared of not trying, of walking away when I could help, of being the kind of person who sees something wrong and does nothing." Is that better? I think so. Because the first kind of fear makes you small, makes you hide, but the second kind makes you bigger, makes you show up even when it's hard. Mia thought about this while eating her pasta. "I'm glad you showed up for those people." "Me too, baby." Even though it was scary? Especially because it was scary. Ryan got a letter 6 months after David's arrest. It was from Jason Torres, the auditor who'd been paid to disappear. The letter was short. "I heard what you did. I heard you didn't walk away when they threatened you. I'm ashamed I took the money and left. Ashamed I let fear win. But I'm also grateful someone finished what I started. Someone had the courage I didn't have. Thank you for that. Thank you for being better than I was." Ryan read the letter 3 times and felt something complicated. Not judgment. He understood why Jason had taken the deal, why he'd chosen his family over the truth. Ryan had almost made the same choice. The difference was just luck. Just timing. Just Elena happening to be in the same elevator when it broke down. Just a series of small decisions that added up to something bigger than any single person. He wrote back, "You weren't a coward. You were a father protecting his family. I would have done the same thing. The only reason I didn't is because I had help. Because other people stood with me. Because I got lucky. Don't carry shame for making a choice anyone would have made. Carry hope that the next person in your position has better options." A year after the FBI raid, Vail Industries settled with the affected employees. The company restored 92% of the stolen pension funds through a combination of asset seizure, insurance claims, and corporate restitution. It wasn't perfect. Some people still lost money they'd counted on. Some retirements got delayed. Some families had to adjust their plans. But it was better than nothing. Better than the total loss it would have been if no one had looked. If no one had questioned, if no one had been willing to risk everything to expose the truth. Ryan attended the settlement announcement, stood in the back of the room and watched families react to the news that their money was coming back. Saw relief and anger and grief all mixed together on faces of people who'd spent months not knowing if they'd lost everything. One woman, maybe 60, gray hair, tired eyes, approached him afterward. "You're Ryan Carter," she said. "Yeah. I worked at Vail for 33 years. I was supposed to retire next month. And then I got told my pension was gone, that I'd lost everything." Her voice shook. "I was going to have to keep working until I died, until my body gave out, because people I trusted stole from me." Ryan didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be proud. You gave me my retirement back. You gave me a future I thought was gone." She reached out and squeezed his hand. "Thank you for not walking away." Ryan felt tears burn his eyes. "You're welcome." She walked away and Ryan stood there in the empty conference room and felt the weight of what they'd done. Not just exposed fraud. Not just recovered money. They'd given people their futures back. They'd proven that sometimes the system actually worked. That sometimes people with power faced consequences. That sometimes telling the truth mattered. It wasn't a perfect victory. David Marsh was in prison, but the other executives had plea deals that kept them out. Catherine Reeves had been vindicated, but her career was still damaged by years of being dismissed. Elena had lost her company, but gained something that looked like peace. And Ryan had a better job, but still struggled with rent, and still worried about Mia, and still carried scars from the weeks when he thought David might destroy everything he cared about. But they'd done something. They'd made a difference. They'd stood up when they could have walked away. And in a world that often felt designed to punish people for caring, that meant something. Ryan picked Mia up from school that afternoon and took her to get ice cream, even though it wasn't a special occasion. Why are we getting ice cream? She asked. Because I want to, because you're amazing, because life is hard and small joys matter. Mia grinned. Those are good reasons. They sat in the ice cream shop and Mia told him about her day, about a science project on volcanoes, about a friend who'd shared their lunch, about a teacher who'd noticed she was good at math and suggested she join the advanced class next year. Normal kid things, beautiful in their mundanity, precious in their ordinariness. Ryan listened and felt grateful for every second, for the chance to be here, for the fact that David's threats hadn't come true, for the reality that sometimes you fought and won, even if the winning was messy and incomplete. Daddy, Mia said, chocolate ice cream on her chin, are you still doing the truth thing? I'm always doing the truth thing, baby. That's kind of my job now. Good, because someone has to. Ryan thought about that. About a 7-year-old understanding that truth mattered, that someone had to stand up, that fighting for what was right was worth the cost, even when the cost was high. You're going to be better than me, he said. How do you know? Because you already are. You see things clearly. You don't make excuses. You tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. Those are superpowers, Mia. Don't ever lose them. She smiled. I won't. 2 years after the elevator broke down, Ryan got a call from Elena. She was in town for a foundation event and wanted to meet for coffee. They met at Bennett's, the same cracked vinyl booth where they'd planned the takedown of David Marsh's operation. Elena looked different, lighter somehow, like she'd put down weight she'd been carrying for years. She wore jeans and a sweater, and her hair was shorter, and she smiled in a way that seemed genuine instead of practiced. You look good, Ryan said. So do you, less terrified. I'm working on it. They talked about the foundation, the families they'd helped, the systems they'd changed, the policies they'd pushed companies to adopt to prevent future fraud. They talked about Mia, who was thriving in advanced classes and still correcting people's grammar with brutal honesty. They talked about the work Ryan was doing, investigating fraud for nonprofits and finding meaning in using his skills to help people instead of just survive. Do you ever regret it? Elena asked. The whole thing, the risk, the chaos. Ryan thought about the night David had threatened Mia, about the weeks of fear, about standing in his apartment convinced he was about to lose everything that mattered. Yeah, he said. Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep and I think about all the ways it could have gone wrong. About what would have happened if David had followed through on his threats, if the FBI hadn't moved fast enough, if Martin hadn't flipped. But then I think about that woman at the settlement announcement, about the hundreds of families who got their futures back, about the fact that David's in prison instead of stealing from more people. And I think maybe regret isn't the right word. What's the right word? Grateful, terrified, proud. All of it mixed together in a way that doesn't make sense, but feels true. Elena nodded. That sounds about right. They finished their coffee and walked out into a city that looked the same as it always had, but felt different somehow. Like they'd changed it in some small way, like their choice to fight instead of walk away had mattered. Thank you, Ryan, Elena said, for being in that elevator, for listening when I told you the truth, for being crazy enough to help. Thank you for trusting me with it. They hugged goodbye and went their separate ways. Ryan picked up Mia from Mrs. Chen's apartment, made dinner, helped with homework, and did all the normal things normal fathers did with their daughters on normal weeknights. And later, after Mia was asleep, he pulled out the letter he'd written 2 years ago, the one that said, if something happens to me, make sure Mia knows I was trying to help people. He read it once, then deleted it, because nothing had happened to him, because the threats hadn't come true, because sometimes you fought and survived and got to stick around for the aftermath. Ryan Carter had been a broke single father in a broken elevator with a woman who told him the truth about corruption he couldn't ignore. He'd been terrified and desperate and had every reason to walk away. But he hadn't walked away. And that choice, small and scared and human, had changed hundreds of lives. It hadn't been smooth, hadn't been perfect, hadn't gone the way it did in movies, where the good guys won cleanly and nobody got hurt. But it had been real, and it had mattered. And Ryan had learned something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. You didn't need to be powerful to make a difference. You didn't need to be fearless or rich or connected. You just needed to be willing to show up, to look when others looked away, to stand when others sat down,
To tell the truth when lying was easier. The world didn't reward that kind of courage. Not usually, not with money or fame or guaranteed happy endings.
But it rewarded it with something better. The knowledge that you'd tried, that you'd fought, that when it mattered most, you'd chosen the hard thing over the easy thing. And in the end, that was enough. Ryan turned off the lights, checked on his daughter one more time, and went to bed. Tomorrow he'd wake up and keep fighting, keep showing up, keep trying to make the world a little bit better than he found it. Not because it was easy, but because someone had to. And he'd learned that sometimes the someones who changed things were just regular people who decided not to look away when it would have been so much simpler to stay silent. The elevator that trapped him hadn't destroyed his life. It had revealed who he was when everything was on the line. And that person was someone his daughter could be proud of. That was worth more than all the money David Marsh had stolen. That was worth everything.